hashtag #AskTheHandicapper on Twitter. Loads of you have already. We're going to go through a few of those right now. Let's start first of all with Mark Ball, who's not happy with your answer, Phil.
Okay.
He says, thanks for asking the question, but weak answer.
Okay.
And inaccurate, he said in parts. He says, I may be wrong, but Irish 3-year-olds don't get marks until later in the season. That's a better system to allow more 3-year-olds to run against each other and give muscle to collateral form.
Right, that's an interesting point. You know, should we wait longer before giving horses marks? Trainers in the UK want to try and get horses that are never going to win a maiden hurdle. They want to get them into the handicap system ASAP because it gives them a chance. And we've always adopted that policy, and I think trainers are happy that the sooner they get them into the handicap system and where they've got a chance of winning, that's better. So, yes, I can understand the idea of waiting and waiting and waiting because, yes, you're more sure about the levels, but we really haven't got a problem with the percentage of 4-year-olds running against older horses and the success rate. You know, if we had a problem, we'd do something about it. But I think we'll stick with our policy of giving horses a rating as soon as we feel it can be justified.
Maybe you've got a problem, but you haven't realised it, and now Mark's pointed it out.
Well, we haven't got a problem because we look at success rate of all age groups in handicaps right the way across the board. And if we have a problem, it's with 10 and 11-year-olds. And we have adopted a policy of dropping them faster, 10 and 11-year-olds. We have less of a problem with younger horses.
Now, I posed, Phil, a poser, I think is what I posed him, a little earlier on about David John. I think this is fascinating. It wasn't something I prepped him for. I always try and keep something up my sleeve that might just knock him for absolutely six. Going back to Monday at Sedgefield, and it was researched, thank you, Phil, David John ran at Sedgefield. This is him in action. Now, David John first ran at Exeter behind a horse called Taboogaloo, and actually he ran very well in a bumper, was beaten 2 lengths by a horse who went and won a bumper at Cheltenham and hasn't been seen since Taboogaloo. However, he then looked absolutely useless over hurdles, beaten 112 lengths at Chepstow, 91 lengths at Stratford, 84 lengths at Newton Abbot, and then the pièce de résistance, 186 lengths at Bangor, after which he was given a mark of 90. And my question to you, Phil Smith, is how the hell did anyone pluck that figure out of the stratosphere? It's a made-up figure. No one could come up with that mark.
Okay, it's a real good question, and as you'll, I'm sure, be able to confirm to the viewers, I showed you our computer system during the break, and in the Chepstow, Stratford and Newton Abbot runs, there was a capital E, and that means heavily eased. So even though the horse finished 9th, 13th and 10th, our view was that the jockey in all of these 3 races eased the horse so considerably that wasn't a true finishing position of the horse.
But when he was... Wait, I've got to interrupt you. When he was 186 lengths behind, the in-running comment was towards rear, behind from sinks, tailed off next. I mean, of course he was eased. He was tailed off.
Wait a second. That's the next stage in the answer.
Okay.
Because after the Chepstow, Stratford and Newton Abbot runs, before he ran at Bangor, he was given a handicap mark of 95.
Right.
So forget that next run for a second, but we will come back to it. He was given a mark of 95. And often, his performance figures would bear no resemblance to that figure, and I totally agree. However, in his best run, which was the Newton Abbot race, he was a length behind a horse that was 96. Right? So we actually didn't give him 90, we actually gave him 95. Right? So we use a positioning factor as well as performance figures, because to give this horse a performance figure of 26 or 32 would be absolutely...
Oh, hold on.
No.
Was Water Rail 96?
Wait a second. To give this horse a handicap mark of 32, 37, whatever you want to say, would be absolutely ridiculous, because the horse is eased now by how many lengths? It was considerable amount. Water Rail was given a mark of 96.
How?
Let's stick with David John, and I'll answer that, then we'll come to Water Rail. So David John was actually not given a mark of 90, he was given a mark of 95, right? And I think that was probably appropriate given the way the horse was ridden in those races. He then runs at Bangor, as you quite rightly say, and he gets beaten 186 lengths, and we dropped him £5. So we dropped him from 95 to 90. And again, you're probably still thinking, how's it, can he be competitive? But the most important thing at this point is he has not yet run in a handicap at that point in time. So he's got 90. Let's see what happens when he runs in a handicap. He then has 4 months off the track, changes yards, runs in a handicap off 90, and bizarrely, he starts at 9-1. How on earth can a horse that you think is in 40 or 50 pound too high, having started at 100-1, 200-1, 150-1 and 66-1 in his novice hurdles, how can he suddenly start at 9-1 in a handicap at Worcester? Well, presumably because the general public thought, actually, the handicappers have got him pretty well spot on. He runs in the race at Worcester and he finishes 5th.
There's a lot of presumption in that, Phil.
He runs,
you know that's not what anyone thought.
Well,
what they thought was this horse has run down the field a few times and the handicapper's got absolutely no idea what ability this horse has, but it might have a lot more ability than we've seen.
We've given it 90.
That's what they thought, Phil.
It runs after 4 months.
They didn't think the handicapper's got the right mark.
It runs after 4 months for a new yard and it finishes 5th, only beaten 6 lengths. And the decision we made after that race was because we've got a performance figure of 88 off its 90. So we could have gone either 90, left it, 89, dropped it a pound, or dropped it 2. They were our 3 choices. And my handicapping team, at that point in time, decided to leave it on 90. Interesting call. So now we've got a situation where he's running 4 novice hurdles, hasn't performed to 90, but we've slotted him in behind another horse. Right? He's running a handicap very competitively, you'd have to agree, and we haven't dropped him. And then what happened at Sedgefield early this week?
He absolutely bolts in, chucked in.
Job done.
Well, job done, yeah, absolutely, job done. Job done on your ratings.
We've given that horse. So now you're saying we were too low?
No, but that's not the question.
So were we too high or too low?
That's not the question. The question is, how did you get to the mark?
Well, I've explained.
Not whether it's high or low or not. It's clearly too low because it's going to be higher.
I've explained how we got to the mark.
90.
And it's very easy with hindsight to say X and Y and Z.
Oh, yeah.
But the reality is, we've given that horse a mark off 90 when it was competitive at Worcester, didn't win, finished 5th. We've left it. And now it's won a race.
Phil,
and now it's won a race at Sedgefield.
You've made
We've done a
case. If this was in court now and Graham McPherson was with you, you'd be doing very well in your case. However,
my handicappers have done a brilliant job.
There'll be trainers and jockeys and owners watching this saying, are you really trying to make us believe that you gave David John a rating because it finished 1 length behind Waterrail when both were tailed off over 80 lengths behind the winner?
Yes, because Waterrail got his mark from...
But they were just eased down together. They weren't even trying.
So what should we do? We should take everything literally.
Well, how did Waterrail get a mark?
Well,
Waterwell has had 3 runs. It's been beaten 35 lengths, 53 lengths, and then it was beaten 83 lengths.
So we should give these horses a mark based on how many lengths they finished behind the winner.
Well, I thought they were meant to get a mark once they'd finished in the first 4 or 5.
Is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't. All I'm saying is, Phil,
you're not saying that, are you?
What I'm saying is, I have absolutely no idea how you've come up with these.
Well, I've explained how we've come up with it. I think it's an excellent method, and the proof of the pudding is in the eating. The horse is competitive in its first handicap. We did drop it £5 after another poor run. It runs in a handicap off 90. It's competitive straight away, and then it wins. Absolutely not a problem with that whatsoever. Because here's a job which my handicappers have done absolutely brilliantly. We'd have been remiss to put that horse in on 43, would we not?
Well, let's see if the connections of all the others at Sedgefield think it was done brilliantly, or whether they feel that horse was chucked in.
Well, hang on a minute. In this last conversation, we've said we were £50 too high.
I have no idea what rating the horse should get.
And now we're X pound too low.
My argument is merely that I believe it's impossible to give that horse a rating.
So we should have refused to give it a rating?
I would have said so.
OK. And at what point should we have given it a rating?
Once it's got a bit of form that was equatable to another bit of form, which up till then it hadn't got.
Right. Well, we felt that the horse had tried perfectly OK. We had no problem with that. But inevitably, horses do get eased when they're going to be out of the frame.
Let's put it to the public. David John, there's the evidence for the prosecution and the defence. Do you feel that horse warranted a mark of 90 and was dropped £5?
No, he was given 95 and then dropped £5.
Exactly, as I said. It was good discussion anyway. Right, I just want to ask you about a horse called Mia's Anthem as well, because you'll love this. Okay. This is the kind of thing you must get from trainers, Phil, every day of the week. And at the end of the day, you sit there with Mrs. Smith and you pop the kettle on and you say, oh, job done, Mrs. Smith. Because Mark Roundtree on Twitter tweeted before Mia's Anthem ran at Sedgefield, this is the Hexham run, Can understand frustrations of trainers when looking at Mears Anthem. A £12 rise for winning effectively a 3-horse race at Hexham. Excessive. Now that was Mark's opinion. This horse then went to Sedgefield on Monday and absolutely bolted up. I can't remember if it was under a penalty. Was it at Hexham or under the £12 rise? And those kind of suggestions from Mark, and of course Mark might have been right because the horse might have got stuff, but as it happens on this occasion you're right. They must be the kind of thing you get from people every day of the week and then you just sit back and laugh at them.
Not really.
You do.
But it is nice to be proven correct, which happens on odd occasions. He's an interesting horse, Mears Anthem, because his first run over here was in a Cartmel in July when he won off 94. He then came back over here and ran at Hexham off 101. We then put him up to 108. Finished third, we put him up to 108. He then won the race at Hexham that your viewer's discussing, and we put him to 120, and now he's won at Sedgefield off that 120. It's very interesting. We had a debate earlier this year in one of our other meetings about the relativity of Irish handicap marks to UK handicap marks, and a number of people said that, you know, they should be closer together. Well, here's a horse that's won in England off 120, and his current rating in Ireland before that win was 103.
Yeah.
So that's the reason we don't have horses running off their Irish marks in here, because if you can win easily off 120 when your viewer is telling us that it's too much, then what would have happened if he'd run off 103?
Yeah. Right, we're going to wrestle through a very quick few emails and tweets and stuff. Loads coming in. Matt's been on, Matt Bisognino, of course, man who writes some terrific stuff on racing. He's upset that I'm not letting you speak enough. Okay. Sometimes I have to interrupt you because I'm literally just exploding next to you.
Because I talk rubbish.
Well, no, you speak well, and I think Matt would rather hear you than me, basically, is what you say. And he's probably, quite a lot of other people would say that as well. Right. James says, loving Ask the Handicapper. This needs to be a daily show. I think you might want a different presenter from time to time.
Different handicapper.
Well, no, we can't have that. Intrepid Pun says, how come I've seen horses slaughter miles and raised in the handicap? Can't quote one just now, though. Difficult one. John Hunt says, can you two stop it? I've enjoyed the show so much, but I've got work to do.
Is that the John Hunt?
Yeah, oh yeah, Hunty Caller, yeah, he's on Twitter. Jake, ask Phil if Golden Horn would win 8 out of 10 Breeders' Cup turfs.
That's a really good question. I think the answer to that is probably yes, on a slightly less strenuous campaign. Just in terms of rating, yes. As I say, my fear, and I know he's a toughie, which is great, but my big fear is it's a step too far. And as you well know, ARC winners running at the Breeders' Cup haven't got a fantastic record.
Oh, you're obviously forgetting Saki's brilliant run in the Classic.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Arcon, he didn't win the Arc, did he?
I'm
silly example, therefore.
Braves.
Well, but of course you're going to go straight to Dancing Brave, but would you judge the Breeders' Cup turf performances by Dancing Brave?
No.
No. Yeah. Right.
But it's still a big ask.
Hugh says, quite rightly I suspect, he says, I agree with Matt, who said on a previous programme, 120 northern rated horse struggles down south off 120. Samedi Star, a perfectly good example. Are you still sticking by that, Phil, that 120 northern trained chaser will do just as well off 120 at Newbury and Cheltenham and places like that as it would at Sedgefield and the northern tracks?
Well, I think the one, basically yes, is the answer to that question.
Oh, but you've got Nick coming in.
With one little proviso, right? You generally find that a 120 horse running in the north will be running against maybe 5 or 6 opponents, and a 120 horse running at Newbury will be running against 11 or 12 opponents. And obviously, the fewer opponents you run against, the more chance you've got of victory.
OK. Now, this has come across from America. Tony T, who's a handicapper, I think, in America. He says, hello from them over the pond. I've just got to make sure I understand this. Where a horse has served a period of suspension under Rule 11.6... Crikey, Phil's looked as though someone's just shot him with a gun. Neither of us know what Rule 11.6 is. As a precondition to regaining eligibility to compete at the end of the specified time, do you agree with that rule? The question is, I think we don't know that rule, do we? We don't know
I'm
it.
struggling on 11.6. I wouldn't know what 11.6 was in the British rule book, never mind the American rule book.
No, he might mean the British rule, but I tell you what, Tony, we'll look it up, and the next Ask the Handicapper, which will be after the Breeders' Cup, we'll come back to that point. And Robert says, this is interesting, actually, because we're going to get onto the 2-year-olds after the break, but this is just about Emotionless. Would his official BHA rating be affected by his run in the Dewhurst, Emotionless?
I think what has happened is that my handicapper has had a look back at his Champagne race and looked at whether perhaps adding on for ease and style of victory was quite as appropriate that he thought at the time.
Yeah.
So yes, we'll always look back. But in terms of is his run in the Dewhurst representative of his form? Well, clearly it's not.
Okay. Well, that's the latest from Phil Smith. We will be, I believe, is McCoy watching? Is he? Oh, yeah, I can't find any. Apparently, AP McCoy is watching right now, Phil, and he's interested in what you're saying.
Good.
He's the governor, isn't he?
Yep.
Stay tuned, AP. We're going to tell you whether Air Force Blue is any good after this.